Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Tablas Creek Instagram live broadcast. I am your host, proprietor Jason Haas. My guest this week is somebody who I am super excited for you to meet if you have not already. This is Jacqueline Coleman, who is a Miami-based writer, consultant, podcast host, just great wine communicator. So super excited to dive into all of this with her. But while we wait for people to join, as I always do, I want to share a few pictures as to what's going on here at the Vineyard. I will start by saying that I wrote a blog a few weeks back talking about how the weather here has been boring so far and that is just perfect. And that has continued. We have had absolutely lovely weather over the first half of the growing season. It has been consistently sunny and pleasant, mild, warm but not hot, modest winds, just perfect. So let me share a few of the main grape varieties with you and show you how they're looking. So I'm going to start with something maybe a little more obscure. I'm going to start with Senso. So this is a head-trained Senso block, and you can see how lush and vigorous and exuberant the shoots are. I'll dive in a little deeper and show you the berries. You have these sort of oval, loose clusters that are kind of just perfectly where they should be at this point. Okay, show you the next variety is going to be Grenache. So you can see this like big, thick, old Grenache trunk. This is a almost 35-year-old vine at this point. I'll dive in to the berries. And the berries are starting to clump together into this cluster. Still not quite full sized, but they are the largest of any of the varieties so far. Go back a little further from there, and I'm going to show you Mourvedre. This is the youngish Mourvedre block that we planted 4 years ago. We got this tiny crop off of it last year. We're going to get our first real crop this year. And you can see it's incredibly vertical growth, and I'll dive into the berries. The berries are the smallest of any of the ones that are out there, because again, Mourvedre is latest to sprout and latest to ripen. But again, looking good and growing well. Then I'm going to dive into Counoise. Counoise is looking really good. Here's a Counoise vine, kind of an older Counoise vine, and then the berries of Counoise, which will in the end be the largest of any of the berries that we have on the red side. You see a little bit of that hens and chicks, where there's some larger berries and some smaller berries, which we see to a modest degree in Counoise every year. Then finally, I'm going to go back and look at Syrah, and the Syrah is looking great too. The long canes there, you can see that are extending out at the edge of the frame. And then I'll dive in and look at the Syrah berries, which are looking great. Kind of classic, conical, long, relatively thin cluster shape. So the vineyard is looking amazing. Just what we would hope. It's supposed to warm up a little bit this week, but still top out in probably low to mid 90s. It's just great so far. Beyond that, we are working on bottling. You can see I have stuff rolling off the bottling line today. That includes our 24 Patalenda Tablas, and it includes the next vintage of the Alouette Grenache. So our kind of chillable, paler, juicy, friendly Grenache that we're doing mostly in boxes and in kegs. So look for an announcement about that. If that's your thing, it's coming up soon. Okay, that is my quick run through as to what we're seeing here at the vineyard. I'm going to stop sharing, and then I'm going to invite Jacqueline to join me, and I can't wait for you to meet her. So, okay. So hopefully this all works as smoothly as it did when we tested it a couple of weeks ago.
Hello.
Magic. Technology is amazing when it works.
Yes, when it works, exactly. Good to see you.
It's good to see you too. I'm sorry I missed you when you were out here recently.
I know. That was a quick trip though. That was just a few days with Ancient Peaks and out and back. But I'm looking forward to getting back out to Paso for a visit to Tablas Creek. in the near
Sweet.
future,
Yeah,
hopefully.
well, I wasn't here anyway. I got
Yeah.
back from Italy 2 days ago, so
Oh, great. How
I've been
was
gone
it?
for most of the last couple of weeks. It was lovely, but it was really hot.
Yeah.
Um, I was down in Puglia in the kind of heel of the boot, and every day was in the mid to upper 90s, and the nights only dropped down into kind of the low 80s. So
Yeah.
it was pretty unrelenting. It was amazing stepping out of the airport terminal in San Francisco and feeling a cool breeze for the first time in 2.5 weeks.
Must be nice.
It does, it makes you grateful for the conditions we have here in California.
Yeah. Just don't ever come to Miami in July or August. If that's hot for you, oof, it's like a
Yeah,
steam room out here.
I am well aware. I have family in Florida, in South Florida, so yeah. I try not to go there after about April.
It's a good plan.
Cool. Okay. Well, I like to start by asking people who write about wine to ask kind of which came first, the interest in wine or the interest in writing.
Oh, that's a good question. So for me, I've always kind of been a writer, since second grade, and we
Yeah.
were asked to write our first little story or whatever it was. So that has always been a part of my life as a communicator, whether in marketing, copywriting, a little bit of story writing. I took a novel class at UCLA at one point. Um, but I'd say in the journey of my wine and writing, the passion for wine came first. So that was really what I was interested in. I was living in Virginia, right outside of Washington, D.C. at the time, and started exploring some of the Virginia wineries. And that was really what got me interested in wine beyond, what I was buying at the grocery store. Um, so once I started learning a little bit about the history of the area of Washington, D.C. and Virginia, obviously
Right.
Northern Virginia there, and getting to know the wineries a little bit better, History and Wine was born. And
So
that was back in 2012.
so I feel like Virginia. I mean, Virginia has a lot of long history in making wine,
Mhm.
and there are some terrific wines that come out of there. But I feel like it's a relatively unusual place for people to start their wine journey. And I'm
Yeah,
curious if you
totally.
feel like the fact that you started it there, like, how does that affect the way that you think about wine? Do you feel like it does?
Maybe because I kind of have a reputation as supporting the underdog and the up and coming and the lesser known, I guess. And maybe that stems from my original love of wine in Virginia. And I always call Virginia wine my first love because that is the place where I learned about wine, where I discovered fine wine and boutique winemaking and all these really interesting, cool people at small wineries and that sort of thing. Um, so maybe it does in that sense because I'm always kind of looking for who's up and coming. Um, in the beginning, I started going out to Virginia wineries in 2010, and between 2010 and 2013, I saw that Northern Virginia region just explode. Those 3 years were rapid growth for that area, from wineries going from little tasting rooms that were in historic buildings to large barns with live music and book signings and all of those activities. So in the beginning, I really saw myself as an advocate and an ambassador for Virginia wine. And originally, the blog, because I was not working in the wine industry, I was working for a pharmaceutical company in DC in their government affairs office. History and Wine was a passion project. It was my creative outlet. And so originally, before things changed, this was supposed to be a blog about Virginia wine and the history behind these little wineries. And the idea originally was just for me to sit in my apartment and type away fun little stories. Of course, it has grown very much since then, but that was the original idea.
Ah, cool. I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
Did you have an aha wine or aha wine moment? And if so, I'm curious if it was with a Virginia wine or with something else.
So there were a couple things happening at the same time. Like I said, I worked in this government affairs office for a very well-known pharmaceutical company. So when we would have our executives come into town, of course, there would be lots of nice dinners out in Washington. And DC has a great dining scene. And so I was exposed to restaurants and wines that I would have otherwise not been exposed to on my budget at the time. So I started to kind of get a taste of fine wine. Um, at the time, The Prisoner had just come out by Oren Swift, and it was a different product than it is today. So that was hot on the market. Our executives always wanted to get a bottle of that, and it was very allocated. And, um, you know, at the same time, I was going out to the Virginia wineries to visit with my girlfriends on the weekends. And then also at the same time, my dad had encouraged me to join the Wall Street Journal Wine Club. So I was getting a shipment of wine every quarter. Um, and these were wines from all over the world. But again, wines that I otherwise would not have access to at my little local stores, or that I wasn't shopping for because they might be a little out of my price range. Um, but I was getting these wines, I was getting the tasting notes, I was reading them. I was going to Virginia, I was having these dinners with these executives. So all of these things were kind of coming together to kind of give me that aha moment that there was something special here, and it went beyond the $3 chuck that I was getting from Trader Joe's. So that was all kind of happening at the same time.
And you mentioned your dad encouraged you to get involved in this way with the Wall Street Journal Wine Club. Like, was wine on your family table growing up?
No, in fact, I would say in my family there was a probably more negative connotation to alcohol. So yes, there was wine around, but it was not in a experiential way. It was not in an educational way. It was not in a food and wine pairing way. So growing up, alcohol was not really something that I saw myself going into as a career or anything, but that all changed, and it has become a very positive thing in my life.
Yeah, cool. So
Yeah.
you're a Miami native, and you are back in Miami. Can you talk a little bit about your family's roots in the city?
Sure. Well, my great grandfather on my mother's side was one of the founders of the city of Coral Gables, which is a city within Miami. It is actually its own independent city, not just a neighborhood. So he came to Miami back in the right after World War I. In that time, he worked in Atlanta for a few years in publishing, and then moved to Miami. My great grandmother, who he married, was a Miami girl, so she was born here. And in fact, there's this really cool old newsletter, a newspaper article from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution when they got engaged, saying, that my great grandfather was going to marry a Miami girl. So that term Miami girl existed back in 1920. So he was instrumental in coming up with the funding to continue the building of Coral Gables. So Coral Gables was supposed to be a planned city, a vacation city for folks from the north to come down and have this kind of beautiful Spanish style city in this swamp area of South Florida. This was before air conditioning. I have no idea why you'd be interested, but hey, they made it work. So my great grandfather helped George Merrick, who was the founder of Coral Gables, come up with that funding to eventually build the city when Merrick went broke from his original investment. So there are several history books that are written that really do quote my great grandfather as kind of being the savior of Coral Gables and the reason why it exists today. So of course he was one of the first commissioners of the city. He was a regent at the University of Miami, helped founded the University of Miami, very involved in the athletic program there and starting that. His son, my grandfather, was also very involved in the athletic program. He was a past president of the Orange Bowl Committee. My mom was on the Orange Bowl Committee. So, a lot of history in institutions here in South Florida, especially with athletics. But yeah, at least 4 or 5 generations in South Florida.
Okay, so can you talk about the Miami wine scene? I mean, I think probably, my own impression until I dove in a little deeper was thinking of Miami as more of kind of a cocktail kind of a town, but it's clearly got serious wine shops too.
Yeah.
And like, how would you characterize it? What's it like? What do you think is exciting about it?
So you're absolutely right that Miami has a history of being a cocktail town, and maybe some other extracurricular activities that have books and shows have been written about. But and Miami still very much is a cocktail town. I mean, Tequila is very popular, mojitos, of course, with rum. Um, Still very much a cocktail town. However, the wine community, the wine industry has grown exponentially in the past 12 years since I've been back. Um, Back in 2013, when I moved back to Miami from DC, I worked for a short time for a distributor, a local distributor here selling wine, and that was an impossible task. Not only was I new to the industry, of course, kind of switching careers at that point, and I was young, and it was hard to sell wine. And I had a small portfolio, boutique portfolio, but I had some great wines. I had Niels Vinge's Saddleback Cellars from Napa. Niels has a reputation in Napa. This is his label, and it was hard to sell that. And if it wasn't a big name brand like Kendall Jackson at the time, that was it. That was all the restaurants were looking for. And I had a great Portuguese wine on my portfolio that I loved. And I would, taste it around town, and folks would say, well, this is really great, but I can't sell it, because nobody was looking for Portuguese wine in Miami. Fast forward to today, and that is completely turned on its head. There are more natural wine bars opening up than you can even count. There's, several wine bars within walking distance of my home at this point. Everyone is interested in wine tastings and meeting winemakers and dinners and all of these things that, we tried so hard to do back then. And, Niels came to Miami several times to do tastings, and we get a few people trickle in, and, I'm like, come on, people, this is pretty cool. And nowadays these events sell out almost all the time.
And
So,
what do you attribute that kind of those changes to?
so a couple things. Obviously, the biggest one is COVID. When folks started coming to Miami in 2020 because we were the only city that was open for any activities.
Right.
And so we saw our hospitality, and especially our premium hospitality, fine dining, just explode starting at that point. And it has just kept going for the past 5 years. So, a lot of chefs were coming from New York, a lot of chefs coming from out west in different places and opening restaurants. Restaurant groups were opening, second locations. And this has really brought in an influx of educated wine professionals. Obviously, we're on the map of any winery that wants to be in Florida, that sort of thing. So I would say that was kind of the biggest part of what happened. But what was kind of happening behind the scenes, and I say this a lot because I think it's so important. When I did my SOM certification here in Miami in 2013, there was only one program available, and that was it. And it was the U.S. Sommelier Association, led by Rick Garcet. And you could get your SOM certification on Miami Beach, but that was it. That was the only education. And I didn't even expect that to be in Miami, but I did find it at the time. Starting in around 2016, Florida Wine Academy opened. And Alessandra Esteves has been teaching WSET classes there for the past, however many years that is, almost 10 years. And that has been a huge, huge benefit for our wine community here because she brought in education where it did not exist. So, being able to get the certification, she hosts master classes. She does the wine scholar, Spanish wine scholar and French wine scholar and that sort of thing. So all of that started happening kind of, ramping up at the same time. So you have the ability of professionals and enthusiasts to get these certifications, learn more about wine, feel more confident in their wine choices, more experimental and trying different things.
Right.
And then at the same time, our hospitality community was just booming, with the influx of all of these new restaurants and people and money coming to Miami.
I think that the fact that you point to the importance of having that educational option there is I think that is really important because it then creates this nexus from the people who go through those programs, and then they're a lot of the ones who end up starting the wine bars and creating the community around which that whole culture builds up.
Yeah, and don't forget, we're down here in the tropics, right? We don't grow up in a world where you learn about wine through osmosis, right? We're not in wine country. We're not out where you are in the vineyards. There's nothing here that inherently teaches you about wine. You don't learn it just by, your family history
Right.
or walking around. So you have to seek out those opportunities for education. And prior to Florida Wine Academy, there really weren't those options. I mean, the course that I took was for wine professionals. That was
Right.
not even for enthusiasts or anyone interested. So having that ability to take a WSET one and learn a little bit more, or go
Yeah.
to a champagne master class and taste all these champagne. These are things that really kind of started the rolling towards this boom that has just happened. And I would say that Miami is one of the hottest markets right now.
Yeah.
And there's just so much money here, and people want to spend it, and they want to drink good wine. So
It's a nice starting point.
it's happening. Yeah.
So I'd love you to talk a little bit about kind of the range of things that you do professionally, because it goes for writing for multiple outlets, it includes consulting, it includes hosting podcasts, it includes doing marketing, writing copy. How do you balance all these different things, and how have you built the collection of things that you do?
Gosh, that's a really good question. I'd love if someone could answer that for me. Um, yeah, it's a lot, and it's kind of all over the board. I'd say the general theme throughout all of it has been the writing, and my wine column that I write for Biscayne Times here for the past 8 years, just celebrated my 8th anniversary column. So that was kind of the biggest catalyst for all this other stuff. Like I said, I had the blog before, and again, at the beginning, the blog was kind of a creative project. It wasn't anything that I expected to go anywhere, do anything. And if I had only known, sitting in that little room, writing my first blog post, maybe I would have put a little more effort into it. But yeah, I think that for me, it's just I love telling stories. I love talking to people like you and others that are doing really cool things, that are also promoting the wine industry as a whole. And I feel very passionate about supporting producers and especially smaller ones, and educating. And all of these things kind of give me an opportunity to do a little bit of that. So, with the podcast, I've been working with Linda Gassenheimer on her show, Food News and Views, for a little over 5 years now, almost 6 years maybe. And originally she had asked me, she was on radio, on live radio. And for a year or so, she would have me on as a guest occasionally, will you come on and talk about wine for 2 to 3 minutes or whatever it was in the segment. And then she got an hour-long slot on a station called WDNA, which is our public jazz station here. And so that was when she approached me and she said, would you be willing to have a regular segment on the show to talk about wine or beverage or whatever? So I tried to mix it up a little bit with cocktails and stuff. And that was really cool because, again, here I am, I'm like, wow, I'm a millennial and I'm writing for a newspaper and talking on radio, and I feel like a dinosaur. But at the same time, I was like, what a cool opportunity is this to be on these different media platforms and talk about wine and be able to promote people, not only locally, which of course I want to do that as well, somms and educators and even people in the sales force that have great portfolios, but to open the world of wine and bring that to Miami and find these producers, find these wine regions I've been to, and be able to have those conversations with people and bring them locally. So, I think it's just my job is to kind of be an ambassador of Miami to the world of wine, and then also bring the world of wine to Miami. And all these different ways that I'm doing it are just different ways to reach people. And so I'll continue to find new ways if I need to. But I've been lucky with the opportunities that I've had here locally, and I really think it's been a fun journey, and being able to share wine with the community here is a lot of fun. The growing community, for
Yeah,
sure.
for sure. So okay, let's dive into your blog, because that was
Hmm.
where I first became aware of you, is reading some of your blog posts.
Oh, sorry.
Absolutely, do not apologize. um I actually went back and reread a few of the early ones just in
Oh
preparation
no,
for this conversation. They're
I don't even do
terrific.
that.
They're terrific. um but I'm curious, like, even going back to the name, like history and wine,
Hmm.
do you feel like wine is an interesting or useful lens to use to look at history? Like, is that, like, how do you think of those two interlocking, the history piece and the wine piece?
Well, I will tell you, I've learned more about the history of the world through wine and through my travels through Europe, and reading and learning about different regions. I mean, I have learned more about the world through wine.
Yeah.
Anything, any French word I know, I've learned through wine. Any, obscure history I know about some random region somewhere, I've learned through wine. Um, so yes, I've seen the world through a lens of wine, and I've had that opportunity to, which I feel very fortunate, to be able to travel and go to these places. But also, I'm just a supernatural curious person. So my question was why? So I've been able to get that question answered in so many places just through talking to the folks that I'm visiting that are in the wine industry.
Right.
And to me, that has been the coolest part of all of this, is the education, the life education that I've received, on a personal level. Um, because there is so much you can learn about the world through wine, whether you're interested in the history of the region, or you're interested in the chemistry of making wine, or if you're interested in the climatic changes and soil and weather and whatever you're interested in, there's a connecting point in wine. And so, when the blog was started, it was supposed to be about the history of Virginia and that area and wine. But I think that the theme has kind of maintained itself throughout my career. And even though the blog is kind of a secondary thing at this point, I don't really update it with new content beyond kind of adding to my portfolio there with
Right.
articles I write for other publications. Um, but the sentiment still stands, and history and wine go very closely hand in hand. And um, I I want to keep learning why. I want to know all the cool facts about everywhere I go. So it's been fun for someone who loves history. Um, being able to learn about these places has been a big joy in my life.
Yeah, I love the ways in which kind of wine is both a reflection of history and kind of a relic of history. I
Hmm.
mean, and it's also a way that you can travel in time and place from, like, the comfort of your dinner table, which I
Yeah.
thought that's really cool.
And that's my favorite thing to do, is when I have people over, is share a bottle that from a winery I visited, or something, and tell them the story
Yeah,
about why this wine is the way it is, who made it, the family history, um, and that, I think that's the coolest part about sharing wine. That, I mean, obviously you want the wine to be good, but beyond that, being able to share that experience with someone, and the story and the history is very cool.
cool. You more recently started a Substack, right? Am I?
Yeah, yeah.
Um, how, like, why did you decide to do that, and how do you differentiate that with what you were from what you were doing with the history and wine?
Yeah, good question again. Why did I do that? Because everyone else is. I think it's one of those ways to kind of get your fingers out into everything. I'd say that the differentiating factors, I'm posting more about kind of current events and things happening in Miami. Um, whether it's restaurants I'm eating at, wine events I'm going to, wine events I'm planning. I promote my BYOB Miami events on my Substack pretty regularly. Um, so it's kind of more of a current events, current happenings, type publication versus here are the stories and that sort of thing. So it's more of a what's going on.
Right. Like something that's useful, um,
Yeah, yeah,
in a way. I mean, there's a difference between useful and interesting. Like
yeah.
there's room for both, but
Right.
um,
Yeah, it's promotional in a lot of ways, but it's really to keep up with stuff that's going on, mostly locally, but I'll throw in a few travel things here or there.
can you talk a little bit about Star Wine List and what you do for them?
Yeah, this is one of the most exciting things to me, and I'm so glad we just had our Star Wine List Awards here in Florida, hosted here in Miami at Vinexpo. So, Star Wine List is the guide to great wine bars and great wine restaurants around the world. And currently, I think in over 47 countries, something like that. Started by a man named Krister, who's out of Stockholm, Sweden. Um, and so, Star Wine List for many years has been very popular in Europe. It's just started to kind of make its way through different US cities, New York being a big one. San Francisco, I think Chicago, and Miami was one of the first kind of
Huh. Okay.
launches in the US. Um, so my role with Star Wine List as the ambassador for Miami is to build our guide. So each city or country, depending on what you're looking for, has a guide to the best wine lists in that area. And the guide really is just in my case as an ambassador, is my suggestions, right? If you're coming to Miami, these are places I like to eat that have great wine lists.
Ah, cool.
This is why I like them. It's French focused, it's Italian focused, wines of the world, whatever it is. Great Portuguese list, great Spanish list. Um, right now, I think I have 31 restaurants on the guide. Um, so that gets updated annually, maybe a couple times a year with new restaurants, as well as kind of weeding out ones that have closed, et cetera, et cetera. So it's
Right.
updated, an updated list. Um, there's also an app. So I use the app, for instance, when I'm traveling, the Star Wine List app, and I'll go on there, if I'm in Milan or if I'm in Paris, and I'll type in the city, and whoever the ambassador is there, their recommendations will pop up.
Oh,
So then I
cool.
can say, oh, great, I don't know where I'm going tonight, but this place has a good wine list. So I know I'm guaranteed at least that. And most of them, of course, are great restaurants as well. So that's one component of Star Wine List. The other component is the awards, which I don't have anything to do with personally. I do not judge the awards. I do not refer restaurants for, I can suggest that restaurants apply for the awards, but I don't do the referral. So I try to separate myself from that in the sense that, I don't want people coming up to me getting mad they didn't win awards or they didn't
Right.
know about it, because it's not my responsibility. It is my responsibility to promote it, and I will tell restaurants they need to apply, but restaurants can apply for these awards. There's no payment required on their part, just apply. There's a panel of 4 wine experts that are usually master somms, master sommeliers. It changes for every region or city or whatever. They try to have at least one local representative from either the area, or in our case, we had an American master somm who was part of our panel. The restaurants apply for the category, whether it's best long list, best short list, best medium list, best Spanish wine list, whatever the category is they want to apply for. The judges review the wine list and choose the winners. And then the winners are announced at a ceremony, and they get a plaque with a gold star on it from Star Wine List, and they can proudly display it in their restaurant. So I've been now to the awards in Paris several times, the awards in Spain and Barcelona, in New York, and to see the energy in these other places, especially in New York, where they've been doing this for several years now. The somms getting so excited about getting their awards, supporting each other. I was like, we got to bring this to Miami. We got to do this in Miami, because our community is so ready for this and they deserve it. And so we finally got it this year in May, and there were tears being shed. There's people getting so excited for each other, and everybody was just like, this is so cool, because finally our beverage professionals are getting acknowledged for the hard work that they put into these wine lists. And I'm just so excited that we're doing this now and it's coming next year again. So, it's such a great organization. It's such a positive organization to be involved with, and as far as promoting these wine programs. And I think Krister and the team are doing a great job across the board.
Cool.
Yeah.
That sounds really exciting to be a part of.
Yeah. Yeah. And then they do the international finals too, where all the winners from all the top categories, you know, compete against each other. So, you have restaurants from Miami competing against restaurants in Paris and Sweden and all these different places. And it's so cool to see, for me, to see our Miami restaurants kind of on this international stage.
Yeah, I bet.
So it's a cool program.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, so I have already had you here for half an hour. I try to keep these to a half hour. I have like a half dozen more questions that I want to ask, but I will I will hold off. I have one more real question, and then I'm going to ask you to share how people learn more. But the real question I have is there a category of wine, like a region or a style or a grape, that you are particularly excited about that you feel like might be flying a little bit under people's radars that you want to shout out?
I kind of have two answers to that. One of them is, you mentioned Grenache in your intro and your box Grenache. Grenache is my soulmate. So, I'm a big Grenache fan. And the Rhone Valley, of course, being hot place for that, southern France, Paso Robles. So, that would be my pick, just all day and all night, anywhere. But kind of something that's flying under the radar right now that I'm really excited about that needs to be bigger than it is the Portuguese grape Arinto, the white grape. I think it is so fantastic and so hard to find here in the US. So whenever I'm in Portugal, I'm like, Arinto, everywhere I go. But, I found a couple producers out of Portugal that make some fabulous Arinto. Shout out to Avidagos there in the Douro, one of my favorites. But, I think this is such a fabulous acidic white wine that is so refreshing and so under the radar. And I don't want to talk too much about it because I don't want it to just blow up like Sancerre did. But, I think it's such a fabulous white grape and blends and on its own. And I think Portugal does white wine so well. And I know that they're historically known for being red wine producers, of course, port wine producers. But I think that really their strength is their white wines. And I would love to see more Portuguese white wines on shelves and in restaurants, and especially Arinto. So that's kind of my under the radar suggestion / passion obsession at the moment.
That's totally off of my radar even. Can you spell the grape for people who might want to know?
Arinto, Arinto.
Cool.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Fabulous wine.
Great.
Really acidic, kind of refreshing. We had an aged Arinto in Porto last year that kind of reminded me almost like a Sauvignon. It's got that kind of Chenin Blanc acidity. So, yeah, go find some.
I'm gonna go search it out myself.
Yeah.
Okay, so if people want to follow your work, what's the best way for them to do that? Or if they want to learn more about what you're doing, any of that?
Yeah, sure. Obviously on social media, both on Twitter /X and Instagram, I am at History and Wine. So my blog name, History and Wine. Online, you can find me at historyandwine.com or jacquelinecoleman.com. So those are all places where you can find links to other things that I do and other sites. But really, social media kind of uses kind of my hub and then link out to other things. So Instagram's a great place to find me.
Awesome. Well, Jacqueline Coleman, thank you so much for taking a chunk out of your Wednesday afternoon to share your story. I think it's super cool, and thanks for everything you do.
Thank you, Jason. I had a lot of fun today. So thank you for having me.
Excellent. Okay. Everybody, I will see you in a couple of weeks. I hope you're staying cool wherever you are. And fingers crossed it stays it stays boring out here. Boring at this time of year in wine country is exactly what you hope for. So, cheers. Thanks, Jacqueline.
Bye.
Bye,
Thanks.
everybody.